It all started with a single, gut-punching moment. The realization that my due La 135,000 off-road Biasta custom-built Titan XLR was gone. I'd been lounging in my recliner that crisp Saturday morning, March 28th, 2025, sipping black coffee strong enough to wake the dead, when my phone lit up with a notification that stopped me cold. Titan XLR tracker, movement detected. My heart didn't race. It didn't even skip a beat. Instead, a slow, simmering grin spread across my face. I've been waiting for this. Someone had finally taken the bait, and I had a pretty damn good guess who it was. Linda Grayson, the self-appointed dictator of the Pinewood Estates HOA. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I'd rigged the Titan with a state-of-the-art GPS tracker and a silent alarm system tied straight to the local sheriff's department. This wasn't just a vehicle theft. This was a reckoning. Let me back up a bit, because this story doesn't start with the Titan going missing. It starts years earlier, when I first moved into Pinewood Estates, a quiet little suburban enclave where the houses were tidy, the lawns were manicured, and the HOA ruled with an iron fist. I'm Jake Tanner, by the way 42, single, and a guy who likes his toys. The Titan XLR wasn't some midlife crisis purchase to flaunt in front of the neighbors. It was a reward. I'd spent a decade grinding as a freelance contractor, building custom homes for people with more money than sense, and I'd finally saved up enough to splurge on something for myself. A gleaming, matte black off-road monster with 38-inch tires, a lifted suspension, and a growl that could shake the windows. It was my pride and joy, parked proudly in my driveway because my garage was a chaotic mess of tools, spare parts, and half-finished projects I didn't want Linda snooping around. Linda Grayson wasn't your average HOA busybody. She was a force of nature 5'4", peroxide blonde hair, pulled into a perpetually tight bun, and a voice that could cut glass. She'd been running Pinewood Estates like her own personal fiefdom for as long as anyone could remember, armed with a clipboard, a rulebook she'd practically rewritten herself, and a posse of spineless yes-men who nodded along to her every decree. To Linda, every blade of grass out of place was a personal affront, every unapproved mailbox a declaration of war. And me? I'd been in her crosshairs since day one. It started small. A note on my door about my trash cans being VY Cybel from the street, fair enough. I moved them. Then a due law 50 fine for Leah VYing my truck parked on the curb overnight during a weekend when I was out of town. Annoying, but I paid it. But then came the Titan. I'd only had it a week when Linda showed up at my door, her lips pursed like she'd just sucked on a lemon. "That thing," she said, pointing at my gleaming machine, "is an eyesore. It's too big, too loud, and those tires are a violation of Section 12, subsection B of the HOA covenants." I stood there, arms crossed, peering at her through the crack in my door. I didn't even bother opening it all the way, trying not to laugh. The tires? She was mad about the size of my tires? I told her I'd look into it, shut the door, and figured that was the end of it. Spoiler, it wasn't. Over the next few months, Linda's obsession with the Titan grew. She'd drive by my house in her little white Prius, slowing down just enough to glare at it. She'd leave passive-aggressive voicemails about neighborhood standards and community pride. Once I caught her taking pictures of it from the sidewalk, her phone held up like she was gathering EVY Denke for a grand jury. I didn't confront her. I didn't need to. I knew her type. She wasn't just annoyed. She was plotting. And I'd dealt with enough petty tyrants in my life to know that the best defense was preparation. That's why I'd installed the tracker. It wasn't cheap, cost me a cool $1,200 to have it wired in by a buddy who specialized in high-end security systems, but it was worth every penny. The Titan wasn't just tagged with GPS. It had a motion sensor that pinged my phone the second it moved more than 10 feet, and a secondary alert that went straight to the sheriff's dispatch if it left my property without my authorization. I'd even added a little bonus, a hidden dash cam that started recording the moment the engine turned over. Call it paranoia if you want. I called it insurance. Linda wasn't the first HOA nut job I'd crossed paths with, but she was about to be the most memorable. So there I was, that Saturday morning, staring at my phone as the app showed the Titan's little red dot creeping down the street. I tapped into the real-time map, my coffee growing cold in my hand, and watched as it stopped 3 blocks away right in front of Linda's house. I couldn't believe it. The audacity. She hadn't just towed it or had it impoundage taken it, loaded it onto a flatbed or something, and hauled it straight to her garage like it was hers to claim. I pictured her standing there in her pristine driveway, hands on her hips, smugly thinking she'd won. Abandoned property, she'd probably call it. A blight on the neighborhood, removed for the greater good. Except it wasn't abandoned. It was mine, and I had her dead to rights. I didn't rush out the door. I didn't need to. The sheriff's alert had already been triggered, and I knew they'd be on their way. Instead, I grabbed my keys, slipped on my boots, and strolled out to my truck with all the calm of a man who knows he's holding a royal flush. I drove over to Linda's place, parked across the street, and leaned against the hood, arms crossed, waiting for the show to start. Her garage door was still up, and there it was, me Titan, gleaming under the fluorescent lights, surrounded by her neatly organized shelves of garden tools and HOA binders. She was inside, probably sipping her 3rd mimosa of the morning, oddly VYS to the storm about to break over her head. I could have marched up there and confronted her myself, but why ruin the surprise? The distant wail of sirens was already growing louder. The sheriff's cruiser pulled up 5 minutes later, lights flashing, but siren off, a deputy stepping out with the kind of no-nonsense stride that said he'd seen it all. Deputy Mark Hensley, early 30s, buzz cut, built like he could bench press my Titan if he had to. I met him a few times at the local diner. He was a good guy, didn't mess around. He glanced my way, gave a quick nod, then headed straight for Linda's front door. I stayed where I was, watching as he knocked 3 sharp raps that echoed down the quiet street. The door swung open, and there she was, Linda in all her glory, wearing a pastel cardigan and a look of pure indignation. "What's this about?" I heard her snap, her voice carrying over the still morning air. Mark didn't flinch. He held up a tablet, showing her something probably the alert from my tracker, and started talking in that calm, authoritative tone cops use when they're not in the mood for bullshit. Linda's arms flailed as she launched into her defense, gesturing wildly toward the garage. It was abandoned, I caught her saying. Sitting there for weeks, an absolute disgrace. I was doing the neighborhood a favor. Mark shook his head, pointing at the tracker data, and I saw Linda's face falter for the first time. She hadn't expected this. She thought I was too dumb or too lazy to fight back. That's when I decided to make my entrance. I pushed off the truck and sauntered across the street, hands in my pockets, a grin tugging at the corners of my mouth. "Everything okay over here, Linda?" I called out, my voice dripping with mock concern. Her head whipped around, and the look on her face, pure, unadulterated panic, was worth every penny I'd spent on that tracker. She froze mid-sentence, her mouth hanging open, eyes darting between me and Mark like a cornered animal. "Jake," she sputtered, "this is a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" I cut in, stepping closer. "You took my due, $135,000 Titan XLR from my driveway, without asking, loaded it into your garage like it was yours, and now you're calling it a misunderstanding? That's a hell of a story, Linda. Why don't you tell Deputy Hensley here about your HOA rules while you're at it? I'm sure he'd love to hear how you justify grand theft auto." Mark turned to me, one eyebrow raised. "This your vehicle, Mr. Tanner?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. I nodded, pulling out my phone to show him the app-live footage from the dash cam, time-stamped and crystal clear, showing Linda and some guy I didn't recognize hauling the Titan onto a trailer at 7:42 a.m. that morning. "Tracked it every inch of the way," I said, "and the alert system's been pinging your dispatch since it left my property." Linda's face went from red to purple, her hands clenched into fists. "This is outrageous," she shrieked. "I'm the president of the HOA. I have the authority to—" "No, you don't," Mark interrupted, his voice flat. "You don't have the authority to take someone's property without consent. That's theft, ma'am. And from what I'm seeing here, it's pretty cut and dry." He tapped his tablet, logging the report, then looked back at her. "We'll need to impound the vehicle for EVY Denke, and you'll need to come with me to answer some questions." She didn't go quietly. "Oh no, Linda Grayson wasn't the type to slink away with her tail between her legs. She ranted and raved as Mark escorted her to the cruiser, yelling about lawsuits and how I'd regret crossing her. I just stood there, watching, savoring the moment as the garage door rolled shut behind my Titan and the cruiser pulled away. The neighbors had started to peek out from behind their curtains, drawn by the flashing lights and Linda's meltdown. I gave him a little wave, climbed back into my truck, and drove home. Round one was mine, but I knew Linda. This wasn't over. The next morning, I woke up to a text from an unknown number. It was a screenshot from the Pinewood Estates HOA Facebook group private. Members only, the kind of place where Linda held court like a queen. She posted a novella at 2:17 a.m., a rambling, unhinged manifesto about how I was the VY lane here. According to her, I'd illegally parked the Titan for weeks, harassed her with false accusations, and manipulated the sheriff's department into targeting her all because she was selflessly enforcing community standards. She painted herself as a martyr, a noble protector of Pinewood Estates brought low by my VY vindictive lies. The kicker? She claimed she'd only moved the Titan because it was a safety hazard and that I'd threatened her life when I showed up at her house. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my phone. Threatened her life? The closest I'd come to threatening her was sarcastically asking if she was okay. I didn't reply not yet. Linda wanted a reaction, and I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction. Instead, I called a friend of mine, Sam Carter, a sergeant with the county sheriff's office. Sam and I went way back, high school buddies who'd stayed in touch through the years. He wasn't involved in the Titan case directly, but I figured he could keep an ear to the ground for me. "Hey man," I said when he picked up, "I've got a situation with my HOA president. She's escalating, and I need to know if she tries anything stupid." Sam chuckled after I filled him in. "Sounds like you've got a live one, Jake. I'll poke around, see if her name's popping up anywhere it shouldn't. You've got the tracker data and the dash cam, right?" "Every second of it," I said, "and the sheriff's report from yesterday." "Good. Keep it tight. If she's dumb enough to push this, you've got her nailed." He paused, then added, "You think she's got anything else up her sleeve?" "Oh, I know she does," I said. "She's not the type to let a public humiliation slide. She'll come at me through the HOA fines, complaints, whatever she could drum up. Probably try to turn the neighbors against me, too." Sam snorted. "Well, if she steps over the line, I'll know about it. Stay cool, man. You've got this." I hung up feeling a little lighter. Sam was right. I had the EVY Denke, the law, and now a heads up if Linda tried to pull anything shady. But I wasn't naive. She'd been charged with theft, sure, but she was out on bail by the afternoon, and her social media tirade proved she wasn't backing down. If anything, she was doubling down, and I had a hunch she'd try to weaponize the HOA against me next. Sure enough, the posts kept coming. Over the next week, Linda flooded the group with sob stories and accusations, each one more unhinged than the last. She claimed I'd emotionally traumatized her by calling the sheriff, that I'd VY OLAT HOA bylaws by installing the tracker, as if that made any sense, and that my Titan was a public nuisance that threatened property values. She even hinted at legal action against me for defamation, which was rich considering she was the one caught stealing. The neighbors were eating it up, some of them. Anyway, I saw comments from her loyalists, people like Margaret Klein and Ed Russo, chiming in with "We stand with you, Linda," and "Something needs to be done about him." It was a witch hunt, and I was the target. But not everyone was buying it. I got a few quiet messages from folks who'd had their own run-ins with Linda people like Sarah and Gwynn, who'd been fined lot 200 for planting unapproved flowers, and Mike Delgado, who'd nearly lost his shed because Linda claimed it was 6 inches too close to the property line. They were fed up, and my little showdown with her had lit a spark. "Keep fighting her," Sarah texted me. "She's been out of control for years." Mike offered to back me up at the next HOA meeting. I thanked them, but told them to sit tight. I had a plan, and I wasn't ready to tip my hand just yet. The HOA board meeting was 2 weeks later, and the tension in Pinewood Estates had reached a boiling point. Linda's posts had stirred up a hornet's nest. Half the neighborhood wanted my head on a pike. The other half was whispering about her downfall. I'd spent the interim gathering my ammo, printouts of the GPS logs, the the sheriff's report, the dashcam footage, and a little something extra I dug up with Sam's help. Turns out Linda had a history fine she'd issued that mysteriously disappeared after private discussions with homeowners, a landscaping contract she'd pushed through with her cousin's company at triple the going rate, and a paper trail showing she'd tapped in my private well last summer to water her prize-winning roses during a drought. I'd had a hunch about that Wannabe water bill had spiked out of nowhere, and a quick check with the utility company confirmed it. She'd spliced into my line without a permit, without asking, and without a shred of shame. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a stuffy little room with fluorescent lights and folding chairs. Linda strutted in early, her usual smug grin plastered on, flanked by Margaret and Ed like they were her royal guard. I showed up right on time, a thick folder under my arm, and took a seat near the front. The board 5 members, including Linda, sat at a long table, shuffling papers and avoiding eye contact. The room was packed, standing room only, with neighbors craning their necks to get a look at the showdown they knew was coming. Linda kicked things off with her usual spiel, her voice dripping with fake sincerity. "Good evening, everyone. I know there's been some unrest lately, and I want to address it head on. We have a member, Mr. Tanner, has been causing chaos in our community. His refusal to follow basic rules, his aggressive behavior, and his baseless accusations against me have undermined everything we've worked for here at Pinewood Estates. I propose we issue a formal reprimand and a due law 1,000 fine for his violations, effective immediately." The room buzzed. Margaret clapped like she'd just heard a sermon. A few others nodded along. But I saw Sarah and Mike exchange a look, and I knew it was time. I stood up, slow and deliberate, and cleared my throat. "Before you vote on that," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter, "I'd like to say a few things. Linda's right, there's been unrest. But let's talk about why." I opened my folder and started laying out the EVY piece by piece, like a prosecutor building a case. 2 weeks ago, Linda stole my Titan XLR from my driveway. Not toadstole. Loaded it onto a trailer and took it to her garage, thinking I wouldn't notice. Except I did, because it's got a GPS tracker and a sheriff's alert system. Here's the data. I slid the printouts across the table. Here's the sheriff's report, filed after she was caught red-handed. And here's the dashcam footage time-stamped, showing her and an accomplice taking it at 7:42 a.m. on March 28th. The room went quiet, save for the rustle of papers as the board members passed them around. Linda's face was a mask of fury, but I wasn't done. "That's just the start," I said. "Last summer, Linda tapped into my private, well-legalized water her garden. No permit, no permission, just theft. Here's the utility report showing the spike, and here's the county record of her unpermitted splice. And then there's the HOA itself. Fines that vanish after talks. A landscaping deal with her cousin that cost us triple what it should vessel. I keep going." Linda shot to her feet, her chair scraping back. "This is slander," she yelled. "You have no proof. You're just—" "Proof's right here," I said, tapping the folder. "And there's more where that came from. The real problem isn't me, folks. It's her. She's been running this HOA like her personal playground, breaking laws, abusing power, and bullying anyone who stands in her way. How many of you have paid fines for nothing? How many of you are scared to plant a flower or park a car because of her?" The room erupted murmurs, turning to shouts, people leaning forward, some nodding, others glaring at Linda. She tried to regain control, banging her gavel and screeching about order, but it was too late. The board's VYC president, a quiet guy named Paul Henshaw, stood up. "Linda," he said, his voice steady, "we need to discuss this. Privately. Now." They shuffled into a back room, Linda shooting me a death glare as she went. The neighbors stayed put, buzzing with speculation. 10 minutes later, Paul came back alone. "After re-VYEW," he said, "the board has voted unanimously to remove Linda Grayson from her position as HOA president, effective immediately. We'll be conducting a full audit of her actions and re-VYing our bylaws to prevent this in the future." The room exploded again, cheers from some, gasps from others. Linda stormed out a side door, her face a thundercloud, and that was that. She was done. Weeks later, I got a letter from the new HOA president, Paul, apologizing for Linda's misconduct and promising change. The Titan was back in my driveway, shining like a middle finger to her reign. Word got around that Linda tried to start a new HOA in a neighboring subby VY Shown, but her reputation followed her. Nobody wanted a dictator next door. She faded away, a cautionary tale whispered over backyard barbecues. But I didn't let coarse justice prevail that day, and I made damn sure Linda's ghost knew it every time I revved the Titan's engine. The neighborhood was quieter now, freer, and I played my part in making it that way. Sometimes, all it takes is one guy with a plan and a hell of good track here to turn the tables. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.